Hey everyone, I'm reviewing a book today by George R. R. Martin called Fevre Dream. Fevre Dream is about vampires on the bayou and on the Mississippi and centered around steamboats. If you didn't know, steamboats were a big part of shipping for a long time in the United States because these massive rivers like the Mississippi and her tributaries connected people um, all across the country, not just in the deep south. But Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin, the writer of the famous Song of Ice and Fire series, it's an epic vampire story. It is not just like your usual violence vampire stuff, and I'm a big fan of vampires. Um, so as a vampire snob, I get it. I know good vampire from bad vampire story, and one of the things to me that makes a good vampire story is how does a writer approach them? Do they use the same tropes, which is fine if it's done well, or annoying if it's just beating us with a dead horse of vampires we're used to? And George R. R. Martin, he comes up with a weird version of a vampire, and I'm not going to spoil that for you. So if you decide to read it, and you should read it, you're only doing yourself a disservice not reading it. And you're a horror fan, this is really good. And his take on vampires is amazing. So the writing is fantastic, from the description of emotions to the setting, which is, of course, the antebellum South and various places along the Mississippi River in that context. He really hammers home the idea of this was French land after it was Native American, of course. And then we bought it from Napoleon, right? The Louisiana Purchase. A lot of this book has huge historical references in terms of wars and literary. So there's a lot of Lord Byron and Percy Shelley in this, two of the most forward, well-known, I guess, romantic authors. But it's fascinating that our deuteragonist, or deuteragonist, however the hell you say it, I'm just a savage. They he likes Byron and his poetry, and it's interesting that that's the case because Byron was, what they don't tell you in the book is Byron died of disease while fighting for Greek independence despite being English, right? He went to Greece to help them fight the Ottomans for independence. It's This book has a lot to do with that, and Enlightenment thought and Romantic thought, and this idea of Romanticism versus the Enlightenment and the struggle the two movements had with one another. We see that. We also get a sense of what it was like to live in, even though we don't go to Europe in it, what it was like to live in Europe during the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and it's very similar to World War One. It sucks. There's nowhere to hide. There's war everywhere. So there's that, and George R. R. Martin has a knack for making the reader feel like you're in the room with the characters, like you're listening to this, but they have no idea you're there. You're an intruder in their lives, and said characters have no idea of your presence. So such a sensation in the reader works really well here because we're dealing with creatures like vampires, right? They live in secrecy. They are people of the night. They hunt. They're predators. They are meant to stay out of sight. So for us to feel like we're intruders looking into this information and these people that we're not supposed to know about, it works very well here. Martin knows that, and there's no way he doesn't. Because, again, I think he's a very good writer. And I think, I think it's very rare we have someone who's this good of a writer each generation. I don't know. I'm a big diehard for George R. R. Martin. For even the stories by him I don't like. I think they're very well written. So anyway, he really meditated. I can't beat this enough. He really meditated long and hard on how he wanted to depict his vampires, as well as the steamboats. It's our main character, Captain Abner Marsh, and the harsh realities of living in this United States during the early 19th or pre-Civil War. And it's 1857, so it's not far from then, from the war. But it's really, Martin really captured it. Because the early United States was not easy. It was up against a lot, and it was kind of chaotic. I mean, it was chaotic. It was a lot of freedom for people who weren't used to that because they've always had a crown over them. Maybe the Dutch, I know they had a republic for a bit, and it was strange. We had all these new ideas of the Enlightenment and Romanticism, and these ideals. Martin, for without worry, puts them on display for us to see, falling apart on the path to the Civil War. Right, because that had a lot to do with it too, as much as it did with everything from the 7 Years' War all the way to the defeat of Napoleon. And we were kind of behind and backward, even though we were somewhat forward thinking. I say we because I'm an American, blah blah. But it's amazing, in a vampire horror novel, Martin really puts American history on display as this really chaotic experiment, and just on this reckless path. It's amazing. So he also, of course, deals with the rough and the grotesque reality of slavery in the United States, which is just, again, every time someone depicts slavery and does it right, it makes me feel sick and twisted, and it should. If you're depicting this enslavement of African Americans, you should do it in the context of horror, because there's no other way to do it. You can't sugarcoat it, and it's scary. Man, he does some stuff with slaves in this that remind you that it was a very scary period, and afterwards it wasn't much better, and he is sure to make that clear too. I mean, Martin, if you've read Game of Thrones or watched the movie or the show, you know he loves to show you what evil is, to the point that you can't, all these notions that come out of the Enlightenment, right, and the 1800s, of where do morals come from? Do we have an inherent sense of justice? Do we have this? Martin puts it on display. Martin takes that to task and says, I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to make it so you can't deny this is evil. This is evil, and he does it in a way that's not forced. It's all on you as an individual. He's so good at as if it's like, this is you are gonna, I know. So my name's Keith, right? I feel like he puts things as if it's targeting me, and that's not to make it about myself. It's just the talent Martin has, and this idea that good and evil exist, and for whatever reason I feel like I'm denying that, and then Martin says, you can't deny it because I'm going to show you something so fucking evil in this character. You're gonna have no other way of expressing how you feel about this character other than calling him or her evil. Excuse me, right? So, and of course, as he does that, he tries. It's not like Ramsay Bolton, where it's like there's almost no redeeming qualities of that person. It's Martin likes to make everyone a villain, I guess. It's just a matter of saying we're all guilty, and there's just varying levels of how innocent one is. I don't know. And again, I'm not sure if he was meant to do that or not, but it's awesome. And I love it when he does it in any of his books. So Martin is also fantastic at progression, right? He can move a story with all the subplots and plot lines back to the overarching plot. And it is so cool that the Mississippi River is in this story, and all of its tributaries are taken into consideration by our characters, because it feels like he's talking about his writing process. Especially as someone who wrote such a huge saga that is still incomplete, like Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, it must be a headache trying to keep this all on task. Or maybe it feels very natural. I have no idea because I'm not an artist like Martin is. And Martin, again, he just knows everything has a purpose that you're reading. There's not a word that doesn't matter. And it all goes back to the main plot. And he's very good at I'm just gonna keep saying he's very good at that, and I don't care what people think. If you disagree, please let me know. And maybe we'll have a conversation about it. But I just think Martin's just stellar when it comes to progression and it's keeping you wanting to read more. Keeping you get to that last chapter, you're tired, but you have to read the next one because the progress is you feel like it's going to start moving without you, and you're going to miss something. And again, that's kind of like the Mississippi. And as with rushing bodies of water, Martin loves taking things away from you. I say that like this because we all know the Red Wedding, right? He knows how to make you feel for a character, even if that character does some shit that you disagree with. You can put it aside because this guy is solid. You feel empathy. You understand he doesn't want to do these bad things, but he might have to because that's what he is before him. And then he just takes that person away. I'm not going to say whether someone dies or not in this, but he does have twists that hurt. Just like running your ship into a rock and getting the bottom ripped out would hurt on the Mississippi, and that comes up. So the twists aren't on par with the Red Wedding, but they are stressful and agonizing in some ways. And Martin, of course, really hits us with them, and I love that. I love someone who can really make me feel sick from a tragedy or a twist, because that's how a twist should work. It shouldn't be cheap, and he does not make them cheap. So Martin he makes sure you spend enough time with the characters that he wants you to like to make them impossible not to empathize with, unless you're an edgelord and you're just saying you don't. So more so, his villains are somewhat sympathetic as well. I have a little list here. A question I run into, the good and evil question. I already brought that up. So I'll just say that Fevre Dream, I could write 100 pages of shit I want to talk about in it, but that would require me to spoil too much. One thing I will say, influence-wise, I feel like this had a lot of Lovecraft in it in terms of Mountains of Madness, and if you read both, you can kind of see why. There's other influences as well, of course, from the vampire world, like Bram Stoker and all. I did say this is mid-1800s kind of deal. So it's worth a read. I give it 5 out of 5 goats, and I encourage anyone who hasn't read it to read it, and go. It's a very good book. It's fun for a first review. Next time you see me, I will be reviewing this brick, because I am a big addict of Enlightenment and Romantic era writing, and Napoleon Wars, everything from the 7 Years' War through to the death of Napoleon. So, On War by Karl von Clausewitz, I will review next when I finally get to finishing it. So, I got a lot to go on that. Have a good one, Hall.